Hello everyone, Alec Elger the SideQuest Gamer here, and welcome to part 3 of my classic Mega Man NES retrospective, where of course I'll look at Mega Man 3, which seems to be a lot of people's favorite Mega Man game, at least nowadays, but it wouldn't be a SideQuest Gamer review show episode if I didn't question the general consensus and see if I agree with it or not. Mega Man 3, the sequel to the universally acclaimed Mega Man 2. It's been almost 2 years since its release, and to say Mega Man 3 had quite the hard act to follow would be the understatement of the century. And when examining the development history, Mega Man 3 could have been doomed. For one, the lead supervisor of the first two games' development and what hardcore fans dubbed as the real creator of the Mega Man series, Akira Kitamura, actually quit his job at Capcom after Mega Man 2's release. Why he quit is still unknown, but he did instruct the replacing director Masahiko Kirikawa about some of the concepts he wanted to implement, such as the new characters Proto Man and Rush, because he wanted the Mega Man series to have a deeper story akin to a soap opera. Despite Kaiji Inafune being an involved member of the past two games' development, it is rather odd to see he was not selected to lead Mega Man 3's development, initially. Now, Kirikawa wasn't just some nobody Capcom got off the street. No, he actually has a history with not just the company, but also Inafune himself. They both worked together on the Disney licensed game Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers, which is highly regarded as an NES classic among gaming veterans. Capcom also had to find a new composer for Mega Man 3 since Takashi Teitashi also quit working at Capcom, so now Capcom had to hire a new composer as well. Not surprising that these changes would make development of Mega Man 3 longer than expected. But would you believe me if I told you that development of Mega Man 3 was miserable, even though they found replacements? The veteran Mega Man developers don't speak of this development process highly for a good reason. Halfway through the development of this game, Kirikawa just left. Yeah, we don't know why. But Inafune had to step in as a de facto supervisor for the remainder of this project development, and while Inafune and company don't blame Kirikawa, Inafune has stated in interviews how stressful it was when they lost their main planner, and if they had more time, they could have made Mega Man 3 even better than it was. But because Capcom said, you have to finish this game in 2 months, they did so, and Inafune said the game was rushed as a result. And if you've seen what hackers found, there are things like unused backgrounds and animations that didn't make it into the final product. Also, the devs forgot to remove debug mode, which can be activated by using a second NES controller. But regardless of developmental problems, Mega Man 3 sold more than 1 million copies in the fall of 1990, and critics pretty much said it was not as good as Mega Man 2, but it was still a really good game in its own right. Although recently, I noticed Mega Man 3 seems to be gaining a lot of popularity among new Mega Man fans. Some dismiss Mega Man 2 as the overrated game of the series, while Mega Man 3 was the one that truly deserved the attention. I swear this isn't anecdotal, I even got a few comments confirming this. With all that being said, let's finally dive into the game. The game begins with the Mega Man 3 title screen, but with a really catchy and upbeat chiptune. Yeah, I'm a little disappointed that there's no intro talking about the story of the game with a somewhat cinematic sprite animation. Sure, there's always the manual, but it's not the same, and it's probably the first sign that developers had to meet a deadline and didn't really make as much content as they wanted to. But let's look at it anyways to establish the basic premise. By the way, I miss manuals like these. The story is told to Mega Man by Dr. Light, the scientist who created Mega Man, and it's through a communicator, which is why static is mentioned. After Dr. Wily surrendered once again in Mega Man 2, he found his sanity apparently and is now collaborating with Dr. Wily to build a peacekeeping project. Dr. Wily, the main antagonist of the previous two games, working on a peacekeeping project with Dr. Light. Why does that sound like the stupidest thing Dr. Light ever agreed to? Anyways, Light and Wily need Mega Man to stop a robot uprising in the crystal mining world since they're destroying the places, so Mega Man has to stop them in order for Wily and Light to collect the crystals for their project. At the level select, you are presented with once again 8 Robot Masters. Standard with the Mega Man series, you acquire their weapons when you face them in battle, but in what order you choose to fight them is all up to you. But Mega Man 3 improves Mega Man 2's method of progression, where the bosses put up more of a challenge even when fighting them with their primary weaknesses. But at the start, some Robot Masters are much harder to take down than others with your Mega Buster default weapon, so how you progress through the game is a challenge in itself. I've done playthroughs where I fight Snake Man first, but on the more recent playthroughs I found it much easier to take on Top Man, since Snake Man is less avoidable when it comes to touch damage, in comparison to Top Man that easily telegraphs his next move. I am glad that the acquired powers are nerfed so you can't have a Metal Blade situation where you can take down 4 bosses easily with just one weapon, so I applaud Mega Man 3 for understanding how the positives of this more nerfed method of progression is for the better, because no matter what weapons you have, the bosses will at least put up a fight. And the stages they're in offer a challenge that build up to these boss battles. The first 8 stages have that linear design structure where you integrate, shoot enemies, platform, boss room, boss battle, get weapon, end of level. But what this game does to stand out from the previous 2 games is shown in stages like Top Man's level. There's this small, narrow, horizontal opening that's between a platform and the floor, so if you haven't read the manual, you really don't know what to do but try a new ability you might have. Can Mega Man crawl or slip down there somehow? So you hold down and left or down and right depending on the direction you want to go in, and then press A. Next thing you know, Mega Man is sliding underneath. This isn't just your typical ability you can only use situationally, no. This makes it a lot easier to dodge a boss's jumping attack to avoid touch damage. Yes, learning this ability with just visual context alone can make some people confused, but I feel this visual context alone is enough to come across this ability. This was before the days of tutorial segments, so I feel with a D-pad and 2 buttons, it really shouldn't be too difficult to come across a slide button combination. And since this is advantageous for the player, of course Mega Man 3 would include enemies that would best use this ability. Enemies such as Hammer Joes would swing their hammers at you, but you can just slide under their attack if both of you are on equally flat surfaces, or you can just jump over the hammers and shoot them when their guard is down. Mega Man 3 continues this clever approach to enemy design, since each enemy has their own unique way of taking them out. There is no one way to do so, and it's fun to experiment with even your acquired weapons as to which enemies could be defeated by which weapon. It's probably why I find these games so replayable regardless of what they brought to the table. Because while games like New Super Mario Bros. Wii gives you the exact same level motifs and maybe 1 or 2 new power-ups compared to its predecessor, making it feel stale as a result, I can actually play Mega Man 5, 9, and 10 because each game is short, has 8 new weapons to play around with, a plethora of new boss battles to fight, and new levels, even if a minority have similar motifs compared to its predecessors. Not to mention how some enemies are just unique to their stages, like the snake turrets and even the giant ones with the up and down moving platforms, spicing up the challenge in addition to being consistent with the stage theme. It just gives the stages their own identity thanks to the absurdity of it. But identity isn't the only thing going for these levels, because from a level design standpoint in comparison to the previous 2 games, it is quite good. And this time, it's consistent in quality, for the most part. Top Man stage, as I said before, gets you used to the idea of using the slide ability and does a pretty good job doing so, in addition to providing great combat scenarios such as the top robots on the staircases and the tigers that actually have an avoidable yarn ball attack that's legitimately challenging, but in a fun way. The top spinning platforms are an especially memorable aspect of this game due to what looks like basic platforming from one to the other is actually made more challenging with Mega Man being moved in relation to the spinning top surface. Shadow Man stage, I don't really know what the motif is since either lava or murky water is in glass containers, making me question what it has to do with shadows in the first place. But the shadows do play a part since there are these light bulb enemies that suck up all the light in the room, making you only see the enemies on screen. This can make you risk falling into a bottomless pit, but you're given enough time to analyze what's up ahead and the option to destroy that very obstacle so you can see again, or simply walk away from it and then the room will relight itself up. This is a rather unique take on the dark room idea I've seen in platformers. Most platformers are just satisfied with making the lights turn on and off every few seconds, or have a completely dark area where you either have a limited light source or a good but timed light source. So for the devs to implement the idea in this way makes the stage quite memorable and fun. Sparkman stage stands out with its electrical beam hazards that only the most precisely timed jump can get past, and these platforms only ascend when you stand on them. With spikes up above, you don't want to spend too much time on the platforms. This is challenging and makes platforming tense, but it's just so satisfying to hop from one platform to the other flawlessly when this obstacle is finally mastered. Similar tension can be felt with Magnet Man stage, since it involves magnetic attraction for its obstacles, whether it be for the enemies you can take out with your Shadow Blade, or these giant magnets that try to pull you towards it, which isn't too challenging until the disappearing block puzzles return, with these magnets serving as a side obstacle to those. Now you have to not only analyze the block appearance pattern, but also make sure that the magnet doesn't pull you toward it too much, or you fall into the abyss below. 3 games in, and the disappearing blocks have seemed to evolve as each appearance is different than the last, but unlike Heatman's disappearing block puzzle, this stage allows you to analyze the pattern safely, rather than just hoping for the best like the ones over that instant kill pool of lava. And then there's Hardman stage, which is honestly my second least favorite Robot Master stage due to how uninspired it is. Remember the flying enemies that drop eggs with little enemies coming out of it? Well, we have a Hornet version of that. Remember the monkeys from Woodman stage in Mega Man 2? They're here. It also doesn't help that the set pieces are similar to Gutsman stage in Mega Man 1. The only thing honestly noteworthy about this stage are these traps that take away a bit of health once it's triggered after a second, but other than that, it's a pretty standard Mega Man stage. Not bad, just not great. Snake Man stage, however, is probably the best one in the game due to not only how unique the set pieces are, but also how much goes on in terms of progression and variety. For one, there's these snake turrets that just add to the uniqueness of this stage. Like, why would an area consist of snake-like architecture? Well, these snake turrets as well as Snake Man have their own lively little society here. And after you climb the ladders, there's a set of cloud platforms as well as airborne cloud missile enemies you have to avoid when jumping to the next platform, just because of how much high quality design is present. You know this is a good stage if you're never bored throughout the entirety of it. Gemini Man stage then brings things down a bit because this is probably my least favorite stage in the entire game. For one, while it starts out all nice, then there's this underground area with the bubbles you have to shoot. I find these annoying because you need to destroy at least 2 rows of them in order to walk through. I know you can just shoot 1 row and then slide through it, but the problem is you'll have to slide back because there are other bubbles blocking you, but you can't really shoot them from the starting point. So you need to make room for you to walk into it to shoot the further bubbles. And it gets worse because when you shoot a bubble, these annoying blue ghost-like enemies spawn while you're trying to shoot at the other bubbles. It gets old after a while. Thankfully, there's a section after this that you can either platform your way through, or you can use your Rush Marine to move around in the water easily. So it's not like the stage ever gets to the point where I say it's bad, but the bubbles could have been better implemented to be consistent with that of an action-packed Mega Man game. And Needleman stage has everything you would want for enemy types, including cannons and porcupines. The most noteworthy obstacle in this stage are these metallic spikes that activate and deactivate, that really want you to use your slide ability to gain a burst of speed. It's nothing too complex, but it gets the job done. With 8 solidly crafted Robot Master stages, not one I would outright consider awful. Some are better than others, but they don't rely on cheaply placed obstacles with large hitboxes, and none outright annoyed me all the way through. In fact, I can actually remember every single stage in this game thanks to their unique aesthetics and gimmicks. And what makes these stages better are the Robot Master boss battles at the end. Now, not all of them could be taken out with the default weapon within a reasonable skill level. I could just imagine first-timers just trying and failing to take out Gemini Man without his weakness. But what I like about these Robot Masters is that most of them will telegraph their attack, like Top Man for example. He will launch a barrage of top projectiles before initiating a spin and moving in your direction. Why this boss battle succeeds is because the tops are avoidable thanks to the slide ability, and you know just when to make the right moves thanks to Top Man's animations. Unlike Mega Man 2, where bosses rely on giving you touch damage while being easily taken out by their weaknesses, Mega Man 3's Robot Masters allow for you to slide when they jump towards you, letting you avoid touch damage altogether. And even when fighting against these Robot Masters with their weaknesses, most of them still put up a decent fight, like Needleman and the Gemini laser. Because his weakness is a ricocheting laser, you can either shoot it directly at him, or it'll miss but ricochet off the walls until it eventually hits him, or maybe it'll miss and disappear altogether. Either way, he'll jump around and shoot needles at you and try to avoid your attack. This is a lot better than Mega Man 1 and 2's weapons that just make short work of the bosses. Although the weakest Robot Master is probably Gemini Man. It's such a cool concept of a boss since it both duplicates and runs around the walls. The duplicate is a reference to the Gemini Zodiac symbol being the twins, so that's pretty clever. But all it really amounts to is spamming Surge Snakes and they'll eat away his health. That's it. Same can be said for Sparkman and the Shadow Blade. It would have helped if they deployed some shield against their weaknesses once in a while as a defense mechanism, kind of like Magnet Man and the Spark Shock. Sure, that's his weakness, but sometimes he'll deploy a shield against it. And that makes it a bit more challenging since you now have to wait for an opening like as soon as he lands on the ground after jumping. So while not perfect, the Robot Master boss battles are for the most part enjoyable to fight, but what's even better than the Robot Masters are their weapons. Unlike Mega Man 1 or 2, there's not really one weapon I'd say is too overpowered akin to the Elect Beam or Metal Blade. Sure, there is the Shadow Blade that can be fired in 8 directions and doesn't drain away a lot of energy, but the consequence is that only one Shadow Blade can be deployed at once, and needs a few seconds to return before being able to be fired again. Not to mention its range is pretty limited in comparison to the Metal Blade. This is everything a Metal Blade should have been, a weapon with great power but not too much power. The Magnet Missile is quite fun and effective to use, especially for enemies a distance away thanks to its L-arcing movement homing in on the enemy, although it can be depleted rather quickly, and the Surge Snakes allow for 3 snakes to be deployed at once, and their benefit is that they can crawl up a wall quickly, taking out enemies you don't want to take out head on. The Needle Cannon seems useful since it's a rapid fire type power up, but it's not exactly the most powerful for all situations. In fact, I only found myself using it against certain bosses that are weak to it. The Hard Knuckle packs a punch, pun intended, but the cost of the high offensive capabilities is that it takes a second to get moving and it's not very accurate even if you guide it slightly with the D-pad. It's not that useful for fast moving enemies, but it is quite useful for some of the giant boss battles later in the game, as well as destroying certain types of walls kind of like the Crash Bomb from Mega Man 2. The Gemini laser is quite powerful, but I only found myself using it against Needle Man since once you fire it, it'll ricochet off the walls until it either hits an enemy or disappears. In other words, it's only really useful for a small room, so I didn't really find much use out of it for standard enemies. Just like the Spark Shock, sure it stuns enemies, but you can't use any other weapon when the enemy is stunned other than as a method of escaping, and I'm not one to run away from a battle, so I only really used it against Magnet Man, and the only weapon that I'd say is outright bad in this game is the Topspin, because the point of it is to jump in the air and spin so it can cause damage to enemies with your body, but it's only useful against 2 bosses, because the problem with this weapon is that you're more than guaranteed to take damage for using this weapon. As a result, it's more of a high cost, low reward weapon, so what's the point in using it? While not perfect overall, at least these weapons are balanced where the game nerfed all of them to encourage players to play around and experiment with them, given the multitude of battle scenarios. This is what I look for in a Mega Man game. And don't you think I forgot about everyone's new favorite addition to this game, and that would be Mega Man's robot dog named Rush. Yes, introduced in this game is Rush, the robot dog companion that can work as a spring to get you to higher places you have from the start, but as you defeat more and more robot masters, you eventually gain the Rush Marine and the Rush Jet. The Rush Marine serving as an underwater submarine, and Rush Jet serving as, well, a flying, hovering platform that can get you to higher places while being able to use your standard Mega Buster against enemies. Although sometimes this can allow you to exploit Rush Jet to pass obstacles, which doesn't really surprise me that it was nerfed to just fly in one direction in the sequels, instead of just anywhere like in this game. After all, Rush Jet does make short work of one of the bosses in the game, and his abilities aren't really mandatory until the Dock Robot stages, but as for the implementation of Rush Spring and Rush Marine, I like them. Sure, Rush may just be a convenient way to add a character into the classic Mega Man mythos, but he doesn't get in the way and has a purpose, so I more than welcome his inclusion. Wow, I can see why Mega Man 3 is a lot of people's favorite Mega Man game. Fun levels, good bosses, good weapons, a robot dog. Jeez, nothing's going to stop me from having that much fun anymore as I move on to the next set of challenges, right?
Hey, SideQuest Gamer.
Nathaniel Bandy, how's it going, dude?
Fine, but whatever you do, use this password.
Oh, okay. I was just going to take on these black robots that just appeared. Alright, I'll input the password. Nathaniel, where did all the black robots go?
Don't worry about them. The dock robots suck.
Oh, come on, they can't be that bad.
1 hour later.
Wow. That was...
Hate to say I told you so, but...
Yes. After the Robot Masters, we don't move on to a castle stage because for no in-game explanation or reason, 4 black robots fill the panels of Needle Man's, Gemini Man's, Spark Man's, and Shadow Man's stages. Do they ruin the game? No, I wouldn't say that, but they do pad out the game, and while I don't mind them like it's a constant thorn in my side, it is the part where I'm like, I just beat these really fun Robot Master stages I have little to complain about. I can't wait to play 4 very similar stages instead of moving on to brand new challenges. Who needs originality, folks? Now, defenders may say something like, if you liked the stages before, then there's no reason not to like them now. Yes, there is some truth to that statement. In fact, I don't really hate these levels, not most of them anyways, but I don't love them either on the basis that it doesn't add anything to the game. Sparkman stage adds more instant kill spikes, spinning platforms, and electric plug enemies. That's fairly standard. Gemini Man stage just involves more of those shootable bubbles and a mandatory Rush Marine section. But Shadow Man stage adds more of those platforms that open upon contact, which is over a bombless pit, mind you. This can get rather tricky, but it's not impossible, especially since you can cheese it with Rush Jet. But the only dock robot stage that I find unenjoyable to a degree is Needle Man stage, since there's this mandatory Rush Jet section over this vast bombless pit. Problem is, Rush Jet drains away energy, and you have to collect these energy tanks while avoiding airborne enemies. What sucks about this is that when you die in this section, the energy items don't respawn, which forces you to grind for energy from these dragonflies. But because it's so time consuming, you might as well do a suicide reset to try the level again. This sucks. I don't have too much of a problem with it now, but it is going to leave a bad taste in a new player's mouth when it comes to playing the dock robot stages for the first time. So the levels themselves are nothing special. Nothing that will make me not want to play the game again. Don't. They're serviceable, except for one thing.
You're gonna talk about the dock robots themselves, aren't you?
Oh, you bet your Nintendo 64 game collection I will. What else can I say then? They sucked before and they still suck now. They're the Mega Man 2 bosses that weren't that great in the first place and just rehashed their attacks. Only difference is that now they have new weaknesses. And to be honest, these bosses are a little better than they were in Mega Man 2, solely because it requires more effort to take them down. But some of their attacks are just larger, like Woodman's attack now being unavoidable with just a simple jump, unless you use your rush abilities. And since there's 2 dock robots in each stage and the checkpoints aren't exactly placed before their rooms, this can be a hassle. This is why people are generally not a fan of this section. In addition to repeated level design, boss battles that regress from the standard of the normal Robot Masters in Mega Man 3, and nothing new added except for a higher difficulty curve, this section is simply an unnecessary addition. Seriously, if you input a password to skip these dock robot stages, you would not be missing anything. Heck, the fact that there's not even a cutscene before it explaining why these dock robots are here just goes to show there's nothing really to justify their existence in this game. But I must reiterate, they're not outright terrible where I want to put the game down, but when you go from having a lot of fun with 8 great levels, but then the next 4 levels that are pretty long range from okay to poor, that's a downward slope on the satisfaction chart. And then we fight Breakman. Speaking of which, this guy served as a mini-boss for Shadow Man's, Magnet Man's, and Hard Man stages, doing simply what he is now, jumping and shooting. That's it. It's a very avoidable attack pattern and very underwhelming, but I do like how ambiguous his motivations are, as this is one of the few times where gameplay could be tied to the narrative. Is he a friend or foe? Especially for Gemini Man stage, where he simply appears to blow up the entrance to the capsule and then disappears. This is pretty helpful for Mega Man. And once he's defeated, Mega Man will warp to Dr. Light's headquarters to find out Dr. Wily betrayed them after receiving the last element and ran off with Gamma. Surprise, surprise. Time to move on to the Dr. Wily stages. And boy, is it great to have brand new stages to fight your way through. The first level reintroduces an underwater section with a ton of spice to add some tension, and then there's the Hammer Joe obstacles and of course the disappearing blocks. Basically a little bit of everything to get you into the swing of things. Heck, there are even a ton of weapon energy refills and E-tanks behind the destructible walls, but the end boss is very pathetic. All you have to do is shoot a bunch of turtles with a Mega Buster, and that's really it. All you have to worry about is touch damage, but even then they don't really cause that much damage. Wily Castle 2 reintroduces obstacles from Hardman stages, being the Hornets and these bear traps, but at the end of it is...
Oh, this abomination again. Wait till it sees my new tricks.
Remember how much I said that I hated the Yellow Devil from the first game? It was a few weeks ago, you should remember. I hated how it relied solely on memorization from trial and error, yet these yellow particles hit like a tank in terms of touch damage. But now, since this stage was really generous with E-tanks and we have a slide ability, this boss is pretty fun. Yeah, I'm surprised myself. The particles seem to be slower, so much so that I am given enough time to react to each one, and thanks to the slide ability, I can actually not take as much touch damage, and thanks to the hard knuckle, it can go down in like 5 hits. Haha, nothing will stop me now. Oh jeez! Yeah, the Yellow Devil also has a new attack and it just comes out of nowhere and could kill you easily since all the particles are bouncing at once. I suppose it's possible to go in between the particles, but jeez, this attack is brutal. Regardless, this was a fun boss battle, dare I say it's probably one of the best in the game, and it just goes to show how much Capcom has learned in terms of making a challenging but satisfying boss battle. But unfortunately, the boss battles from here on just become really easy to pathetic degrees. Wily Stage 3 has the lighting obstacles and grenades from Shadow Man stage, but also has this cool platforming section where there are a ton of instant kill side spikes you have to avoid. But then the stage ends a bit too soon with the fight against the 3 Mega Man clones that just amounts to nothing but spamming search snakes at the right one, while the 3 of them fire nearly unavoidable buster pellets. This kinda sucks, but it's pretty easy. And of course, Wily Stage 4 is a boss rush, but at least before the boss rush room, there's a section involving junk robot obstacles. And once the rematch against the 8 Robot Masters is over, it's time for a surprisingly easy 2-phase Dr. Wily boss battle. That kind of sucks. Phase 1, just go under the body of the Nail Walker robot, whatever you call it. And you just spam Shadow Blades until Wily Cockpit reveals itself. This may seem hard at first, but it's actually quite simple, especially if you have a fully charged Rush Jet. All you have to do is ride up there, spam the Mega Buster, and that's it. Dr. Wily of course begs for mercy, and that's Mega Man 3, the end.
Nah, I'm kidding. That Dr. Wily was fake.
But it might as well be the real one because the next stage, being the 2-phase boss against Gamma and Wily, it's surprisingly really easy. The first phase, again, just requires a series of Shadow Blades to the head, and then Dr. Wily lowers his control piece on top and controls Gamma from here on. I do like what you have to do for the second phase to an extent, because there's an arm with instant kill spike knuckles that swings in and out. The trick is to hop on top of the fist, go on the platforms, and then use the topspin in the cockpit, and that's it. One hit knockout. You see, I like the concept of this, but I don't necessarily think the execution was that great. Perhaps if it took 3 top spins with a progressively faster swinging arm each time, that would be one heck of a final boss. But as it is, it's just too easy. With Gamma destroyed and Wily begging for mercy, the whole fortress begins to collapse and a piece of debris falls on top of Dr. Wily and Mega Man. I guess Dr. Wily's gone for good this time. Of course, Breakman appears and frees Mega Man, looking for Dr. Wily, only to exclaim it's too late and takes an unconscious Mega Man back to Dr. Light's base. Dr. Light is shocked to hear the whistle chiptune that plays before every Breakman fight, and Light reveals it to be Proto Man's whistle. Who is Proto Man? Mega Man runs in a grassy area with another panel focusing on a notebook with the names of the first 8 robots made by Dr. Light. And in a shocking twist, it shows number 000, Proto Man, the brother of Mega Man. I love this ending so much. It's one of the few times classic Mega Man actually takes some time to make a story for these otherwise lighthearted characters. We fought a mysterious persistent foe that has very unclear motivations. Was he trying to kill Mega Man, or was he training him to defeat Dr. Wily, a man he seems to be playing double agent for? The impact of this ending is probably assisted by the rather sad chiptune music playing, especially with Mega Man looking off into the distance at an apparition of his long-lost brother. It's such a human curiosity for a synthetic life form. I imagine this is what Inafune was trying to go for in terms of a soap opera narrative, and honestly, I applaud him for trying this. It's by no means the best told story, as this game could have benefited from a few more cutscenes that, thanks to Mega Man 2 as well as later entries, I know they were capable of making that happen. But as an ending, it's actually one of my favorite endings in the series next to X3. Although I haven't played Mega Man 02 through 04 all the way through, so maybe those endings will knock this one out of the park. I don't know. Either way, Mega Man 3's ending was a satisfying conclusion.
And that's Mega Man 3. Even though it's not my favorite in the classic series, I actually get why people love it so much.
Now, like all games, it's not without its faults, and this game has a few major ones. If they cut out the Doc Robot stages and focused on everything else, this game could have been one of my favorites. Heck, it used to be my favorite in the series, but that's probably because of how awesome the Robot Master stages were, and even the Wily stages to an extent. But nowadays, I can't ignore them, as I am more critical of padding when I know a game can do better. Sure, it's 4 stages, but that's like 25% filler, give or take. The difficulty curve is also a bit off, where the Robot Master stages have the perfect difficulty balance between stages and bosses. It's rather moderate, but then the Doc Robot stages up the difficulty a bit higher, thanks to the less than stellar Doc Robot boss battles, but then the Wily stages are about the same difficulty-wise, with the balance thrown off by pathetically easy boss battles, with the exception of Yellow Devil, of course. The curve is just all over the place thanks to these design choices. But ignoring the few design issues, there's a phenomenal game in there. There's a lot more good than there is bad. As I said before, for a stressful development cycle, this game could have been a lot worse. In fact, I'm actually impressed that they managed to pull off this level of polish in such a short amount of time. The graphics, for one, are even better than before. Sure, there's rare instances of sprite flickering just like the previous game, but it's not as bad in this game. The Robot Masters are as cartoony as you would imagine, and the colors used are more vibrant than ever, and some of the set pieces like the crystalline structures in Gemini Man stage, as well as the snake-like architecture in Snake Man stage, are quite pleasing to the eye. Visually, this game holds up pretty well for an NES game, and the soundtrack is just as good as you would expect. I love the title screen theme that starts off slow, but builds up to this epic melody appropriate for the first soundtrack you hear in a Mega Man game. But in comparison to Mega Man 2's overall soundtrack, some of the Robot Master Stage themes like Shadow Man Stage isn't as impactful. It has that fast tempo, but the melody just doesn't grab me as much as I would like it to, although thankfully there are stage themes like Snake Man and Top Man's themes that just get you all pumped up with their melody and percussion working cooperatively to deliver something more substantial. Especially the boss battle theme that is so good, I don't know whether Mega Man 2 or 3's boss theme is better. It has the build-up meant for the enemy to either lower or appear on screen, and once they attack, the music just leads to the main melody. This makes the boss battles more exciting and fun as a result. It gives me the illusion that the boss I'm facing is potentially dangerous. And there's even a few atmospheric tracks like Wily Fortress No. 3, because since that is played on the final level, it's just a boss stage with a potentially dangerous threat in the next room. And do I need to say more about the ending theme? The game's soundtrack is so good. I wouldn't say it's the best soundtrack gaming has seen. I mean, it's no Mega Man X5, but it most definitely delivers in substance.
And given my opinion on the previous 2 games and the development hell that went into creating this game, I am actually impressed at the level of quality they managed to achieve. In fact, despite this game's issues, I think it's overall a good game.
Even with the Doc Robots and all?
Even with the Doc Robot stages.
Yes, I like it more than Mega Man 2. While it's true that 2 doesn't have padding like the Doc Robot sections, it did have an overpowered Metal Blade and the pathetically easy boss battles, which are issues prevalent throughout the entire game. Mega Man 3's Doc Robot stages are only a quarter of the game and only contained in that quarter, and it goes to show Capcom is mastering the Mega Man formula. For the first time in this retrospective, I get why people love this game as much as they do. Some people might even like the Doc Robot stages more than I do. And maybe that's why it's their favorite game in the series. Despite the new director leaving in the middle of development and Inafune taking over, we got something as good as this. We got something that successfully followed up what many people called perfection, and even though Inafune wasn't the father of Mega Man, this game's development cycle most certainly proves that he's the franchise's trusted legal guardian, and it'll only get better from here.
And yes, by better, I mean I really like Mega Man 4. Until part 4 where I give my reasons why I really like Mega Man 4, thank you all so much for watching this episode, and remember to stay awesome. And Nathaniel, thank you so much for appearing in this video. This was pretty fun.
No problem, dude. But I'm afraid I must go now. The triggered videos aren't going to make themselves, you know?
Speaking of triggered videos, please check out Nathaniel Bandy's YouTube channel. He does a ton of these triggered videos, and even some of my favorite games have been subject to the triggering, but they're hilarious, so please check them out if you want a good laugh.